Part 21. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 209. Salt. Looking at the salt in Su Tong's hand, the man's eyes glazed over for a moment, as if he was still thinking about where did this guy get a bag of salt from. This guy is not a cook. Even if he is a cook, no one has ever seen him carrying a bag of salt with him. While he was wondering about these two questions in his mind, he did not realize the seriousness of the problem at all. Su Tong pursed his lips, tore open a large bag of salt and sprinkled it into the water on the ground. In the last script, I brought several bags of salt with me, hoping to see if they could be traded as supplies in the human camp, but ended up piling up all of them on my hands. I happened to have a lot of fun today. As soon as I put down one package, another package appeared in my hand. It was like a magic trick, which made the man frown for a moment. I thought to myself, could this boy be a member of the Cai family? Only when Su Tong sprinkled 3 packets of salt into the water at his feet did the man suddenly realize something and looked down suddenly, only to almost jump out of the water. The wound on the sole of his foot suddenly hurt, as if he had been stung by a wasp. The pain made him gasp, screamed uncontrollably, and fell to the ground. He held his feet with both hands and felt as if the soles of his feet were on fire. The old pain did not go away, but a new pain arose, which made him want to die. There are so many wounds on the soles of your feet. Soaking your feet can kill the bacteria. Oh, it may also be inflamed. It's best to find a doctor to check it quickly. If it becomes inflamed and infected, be careful about amputation. Su Tong squatted on the ground, looking at the big holes punctured in the soles of his shoes, and squinted his eyes and joked. This is not an alarmist. Soaking the wound in salt water will quickly dehydrate the wound cells and kill the bacteria. However, doing so will make the wound very difficult to heal and may even cause inflammation and infection. The man glared at Su Tong's hypocritical face. His eyes were bloodshot with anger, but the pain under his feet was so painful that he couldn't even say a word, so he could only point at him and curse intermittently, "You don't be so proud." Su Tong didn't wait for him to continue, he stood up and walked away. When he was 3 steps away, his body suddenly became light and the strange feeling on his body disappeared. It turns out that the man's strange technique can only be maintained within 1 meter, and it has no effect beyond the range of 1 meter. However, I don't deny that it is indeed quite evil. If I were not physically strong enough, an ordinary person would be exhausted to the point of collapse after just a few steps. At this time, he raised his head and glanced at Mr. Urging, who was standing high up, and saw that Mr. Urging was staring straight at him with a dark face. Su Tong waved to him and slowly raised his thumb. Then he flicked his wrist, pointed his thumb downward, and slid it across his throat in front of Mr. Urgent, making a beheading gesture. The provocative meaning of the evil smile on the corner of his mouth was very clear. Mr. Urgent raised his eyebrows slightly and pointed at the alley to the east. Su Tong nodded, and the two of them walked east. After walking about 100 meters, they reached the entrance of a narrow alley. Su Tong looked inside and saw Mr. Urgent at the other end of the alley, already waiting there. Mr. Urgent took off his glasses in a hurry, carefully put them in the glasses case he carried with him, and then placed the glasses case on the cement pier at his feet. While lifting up his sleeves, revealing the dark skin and tight muscles under the sleeves, he slowly walked towards Su Tong. With a steady pace, murderous aura surged with every step he took, and his eyes became sharper. Monk Ming and Yang San were both powerful masters. Unexpectedly, during this roundabout, the two of them were seriously injured, one after the other. Including the missing Taoist Tai Zhang and Cheng Ren's Zhang Yang who committed suicide, half of the 7 of them were killed by this kid. Mr. Urgent had to look at the young man in front of him with admiration. But this also made him want to see what Su Tong had in store. The two of them were only 15 meters apart, but Mr. Urgent had already adjusted his aura to the optimal level within a few steps. As he walked over, his fierce murderous aura caused all the cicadas around him to stop crowing. Voice. Seeing the urging man getting closer and closer, Su Tong moved his feet and suddenly rushed out, but the direction was not towards the urging man. Instead, he turned around and rushed out into the crowd in the street with a strong step. Don't run. Seeing that Su Tong was about to run away, Mr. Urgent's eyes darkened and he rushed out without thinking. However, just as he rushed out of the alley, he saw Su Tong's back disappearing into the crowd in the distance. You're running pretty fast, but do you think you can run? Seeing Su Tong disappearing into the crowd, Mr. Urgent was not in a hurry to chase him, because no matter which direction he went, there were people waiting for him on both sides. What a pity. I hope your life is long enough. He shook his head slightly and put down his rolled-up cuffs. He was only 36 years old now, unlike Taoist Tai Zhang who was already older. I learned from Zhang Yang's information that this guy is also very capable in melee combat, and he also cultivates evil fire. I really want to have a real encounter with this guy with a real sword and a real gun, to verify the secret knowledge I have worked hard for many years. You must know that in this era, it is also very difficult to find a qualified opponent. But this kid actually ran away, which inevitably made Mr. Urgent feel a lot of regret. He turned around and walked back, and when he was about to reach for his glasses case, suddenly a black shadow jumped out from the corner. It was none other than Su Tong who had just escaped. The urging man was stunned for a moment, his heart skipping a beat, but before he could react, Su Tong clasped his fists with both hands flat on his chest and bowed heavily to him. You! Mr. Urging screamed in his heart, but he had no time to dodge. He was hit by the slam dunk, and his vision suddenly shook a few times. Boom! Fortunately, at this time, a jade Buddha in Mr. Urging's arm suddenly flashed, producing a layer of emerald green fluorescence that blocked Mr. Urging's face. As the fluorescence dissipated, Mr. Urging came to his senses and stepped back several steps. Hurriedly touched his arms and saw that the jade Buddha had been broken into two halves. This move of worshipping the mountain buckle can be said to be unfavorable. I even made a circle to catch him by surprise, but in the end it was not successful. I couldn't help but glance at the jade Buddha held by Mr. Urgent, and there was a sparkle in his eyes. Seeing that the blow missed, Su Tong immediately aimed at Mr. Urgent and bowed down again without thinking. This time without the jade Buddha, he didn't believe that Mr. Urgent could still avoid it. However, what he didn't expect was that when Mr. Urgent saw him bowing down again, he actually crossed his hands in front of his chest and recited a chatty spell. Suddenly Su Tong felt as if he had hit a wall with his aura as he bowed. Not only did it have no effect, it almost knocked him over. Fortunately, he sensed something was wrong and immediately stopped the gesture, otherwise this time I must suffer a secret loss. Hee, boy, this is all you can do. The urging man grinned and sneered. Back then, I had the fate to meet a Shaolin monk who taught me a set of immovable Vajramine techniques, which can protect my mind from being plotted by strange magic. Once upon a time, when Mr. Ji Ming was still young, he was still a fledgling man with a bit of old-fashioned heart. He killed several evil bandits and was valued by an eminent Shaolin monk. He was taught a set of immovable Vajra heart techniques. The jade Buddha just now was given to him by a senior monk to protect him. He thought he would never need it in this life, but he didn't want it to be ruined by Su Tong today. Su Tong frowned. He didn't expect anyone to be able to guard against his mountain buckle. He raised his brows slightly and showed murderous intent in his eyes. Mr. Urgent was not the same. The two looked at each other, and the murderous intent between them became more and more intense. Buzz. Suddenly, the window on the third floor of the building next to the alley was pushed open, and a few children poked their heads out, looking towards the two of them, shouting, "We have been watching you two for a long time, we need to fight quickly, hit it." A few young boys were lying on it and making noise, which immediately put Mr. Urgent's mood in a bad mood. The corner of his mouth twitched a few times, and he looked at Su Tong again. Even if you go far away, let's come back next time. I hope you will still have such luck. As he spoke, he picked up his glasses, picked up a stone, put them on slowly and said, "Don't you want to know what Zhang Yang is going to do? Go east, someone is waiting for you." He turned around and was about to leave. At this moment, several children in the building could not see the excitement and started shouting again. As soon as they opened their mouths, Mr. Urgent raised his hand and flicked his fingers. The next moment, the two children covered their mouths and screamed. When their family members heard the children's screams and hurried over to take a look, they found that one of the front teeth of the two children had been knocked out. Many years later, when these two unlucky children thought about this incident, they felt a lingering fear. It was a pity that they had had their front teeth punched. If they had had their eyes punched, they would probably have to be one-eyed for the rest of their lives. Of course, these are all things for later. As soon as the child cried, Su Tong and Mr. Urgent left quickly. After all, no one wanted to cause trouble. According to what Mr. Urgent meant, there seemed to be someone waiting for him in the east. Su Tong guessed that it was either Qian Shao or Qian Shao's confidant Han Zhonglong. From the previous words of Taoist Zuzu, it was not difficult to tell that these two people were the real rivals. Taoist Zuzu only knew Han Zhonglong, but he had no way of knowing his origins. As for Qian Hans, according to Taoist Zuzu, this guy was probably a remnant of the evil sect who took advantage of the troubled waters during the Republic of China. From the Buddha head murder case led by Zhang Yang, to the future Bamang meeting, and even the assassination of his own master, there is the shadow of this person behind it. Thinking of this, Su Tong raised his eyebrows and walked towards the east. He wanted to see what this big man who was hiding behind the scenes and turning his hands into clouds and rain looked like. By the time they passed Yumapo, there were not so many pedestrians on the street. Su Tong slowly slowed down his pace. If he walked further, he would reach the south gate. As soon as he walked out of the south gate, the winding road was over. According to the rules, the con man and the others can no longer attack him. Therefore, if he is a con man, he must be guarding the last step. Looking left and right, he saw that there were no street lights on the dark streets. The dark streets made his dark vision unclear. Su Tong squinted and walked forward a few steps, and suddenly noticed something. When he turned around, he saw 4 people lying on the road. The 4 people were covered with black cloth and stood there motionless, like statues. To say that they still had there is a second color, which is the large knives in their hands. At this time, a pungent smoke cloud floated in the air. I looked in front of the smoke cloud and saw a figure in the shadow wearing linen clothes and straw sandals sitting on the stone platform at the gate, wearing a blue-gray mask on his face. Mask, holding a cigarette stick in hand. There is a way to heaven, but if you don't take it, hell will have no way to break in. You are a Hosen child who jumped out of nowhere and ran into the palace of the king of hell to cause trouble. The voice under the mask was sharp and delicate, and the tone was neither male nor female, which reminded people of a profession that had long since disappeared. Su Tong examined the mask carefully, but without stopping, he walked towards the other party. There is a big tree behind the Hosen, but I am not that lucky. Su Tong slowly stretched out his hand and called out the big fat man, "Today you are the king of hell. I also want to go in and see clearly whether it is a man pretending to be a ghost or a ghost pretending to be a human." After the words fell, Su Tong suddenly accelerated his speed. When he stretched out his hand, dark blue flames surged in his palm, illuminating the darkness. It didn't matter whether others lived or died, but he would never let go of this 1,000 hands. Sorry, I half wrote last night. I lay in bed and squinted for a while, but fell asleep. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 210. At the same time as the demonic power is activated, Ember's active skill Black Kai's wound is activated at the same time. The wound of Black Chi. Spending 15 script points activating all attacks can increase the power of corrosive fire. After the Black Kai's wound is activated, the probability of generating bone-attached fire increases by 30%. Please feel it yourself for details. The domineering power of the demon and the viciousness of the corrosive fire, two extreme dark flames, actually formed an extremely rare tacit understanding under his palm. It is precisely because of the dark constitution that the two prop cards of the dark system have strong similarities. It had already erupted, and immediately a terrifying black-blue fire ignited in front of his eyes, and the evil was unstoppable. A lion fights a rabbit with all his strength, not to mention facing this old monster who has survived to this day during the Republic of China. It's a good time. The evil fire was raging in front of him, and terrifying laughter came out from under the mask. His figure suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of Su Tong the next second. Facing the terrifying flames in front of him, the old guy raised his arms brazenly, his fingers bent, and a dark force enveloped his arms. Colorful play, Mud Dragon. With a sly laugh, the black aura turned into sludge and surged out from Qin Zhao's arms. He couldn't help but cover the flames in front of him, and there was a huge aura that was about to come back. At this time, an even weirder scene appeared. The index finger and ring finger of Thousand Hands reached out like lightning, causing the surrounding time to pause. The next moment, two slender fingers seemed to ignore the constraints of space and time, appearing out of thin air. Su Tong's chest. At the critical moment, Su Tong's pupils tightened, and a terrible suction force suddenly broke out between his hands. The extreme flame turbine was activated, and two kinds of dark flames exploded in the palm of his hand. Countless fire blades were pressed towards him with his big hand. In the blue-black light, there was death wrapped in strands, and a terrifying upward suction force caused Qin Zhao's fingers to be suddenly cut off when they stabbed his chest. However, when Su Tong looked out of the corner of his eye, he realized that these two fingers were actually wood. I was suddenly shocked, and an ominous premonition suddenly came from my heart. Good boy, you have the ability. There was a giggle from under the mask, and with the fire blade suddenly exploding in front of him, a red light suddenly flashed out of Qin Zhao's body, followed by countless densely packed flying needles exploding from his body. Puff puff. Each flying needle is as thin as a hair, and it is difficult to distinguish with the naked eye in the dark. In an instant, he saw that everything within 10 meters was covered with a dense layer of flying needles. Even the surrounding cement and stones, if you look carefully, you will find that there are hair-like iron needles growing on them. Looking at Su Tong again, he saw that the fat man who had been summoned before was now like a big mountain standing in front of him. The papery body was covered with a layer of hair-like flying needles, and there was no place from head to toe that could be struck. Fortunately, his paper armor was strong enough, otherwise the unlucky person would be Su Tong hiding behind him. What you do as a puppet really means something like that. The sound of praise came from behind Su Tong. He turned around and frowned. He saw another Qin Zhao sitting in the shadow behind him. He looked like the one just now, even the big smoking pot in his hand had not changed. Puppet. Su Tong glanced at the fragments at his feet, with a look of doubt in his eyes. He looked around carefully, and finally vaguely saw that the dark sky above his head was actually countless dense black threads. In other words, this place is like a puppet show shed, shrouded in mechanical lines. The real Thousand Hands only need to hide in a corner and move their fingers. Are you a master of the CAI family? Seeing this situation, he couldn't help but suddenly remember that he had seen Mr. Song record a secret history of the CAI family in the Qingyun Yishulu. Although it was only a few words, it was deeply memorable. It reads, during the Republic of China, Shui Xian'er, a master of the CAI family, controlled the 8 Anis with one person and staged the 8 immortals crossing the sea in the busy city. It was like 8 gods descending from the sky, and his skills shocked the world. But then he became anonymous again and disappeared. This scene made him doubt the relationship between this thousand hands and Narcissus. He, you are quite interesting. I have been to the Cai family, I have read the books of the Mahist family, I have become a monk twice before the Buddhist temple, I also practiced Taoism in a Taoist temple for 2 years, and finally I hid in my Hua village in Sichuan for 7 years. Speaking of which, when you 4 little Yinmen people see me, you have to call me uncle. Oh my, after living for such a long time, I just can't finish learning. Qian Shao sat on the stone steps, beating his legs and talking about his travels over the years like a treasure trove. With so many identities, Su Tong couldn't help but wonder whether what this guy said was true. If it was true. His good guy, this old ghost can live in a coma and still live, he is like Voldemort. Boy, let's talk. I think what you did just now seems a bit like an old friend. Qian Shu was not in a hurry, took a few puffs of cigarette, and gestured to chat with Su Tong. Old friend, these words can't help but make him a little surprised. His method is unprecedented and unmatched, but even if players want to copy it, it may not be easy. After all, not everyone can get the 3 prop cards, Dark Physique, Demonic Power, and Ember. But Qian Shu nodded and said categorically, an old friend from the Republic of China, this person is called Huo Wuji. He has Hunyuan fire. He really had few opponents at that time. Unfortunately, he was unlucky and met his nemesis. He was killed by Longmen Quanzhen. The leader of the teaching stabbed him to death with a sword. He. Su Tong felt unlucky and said for a long time that he was just a supporting character. No matter how famous he was, he became a stepping stone for others. Seeing Su Tong's impatience, Qian Shu had no choice but to continue, I don't want to be your enemy, but you almost ruined my life, so I can't let you go easily. As long as you submit to me, I will guarantee you a share. What a great opportunity. Tell me about the opportunity first. When Su Tong heard this, his eyes lit up. He was worried that the main mission was unclear and had nowhere to start, so he just tried to get some useful information from Qinzhi's mouth. 2 words. Qian Shao took a puff of the cigarette rod in his hand, and then said, immortal treasure. Rumble, rumble. After spitting out these 2 words, it seemed that the sky was feeling something. The sky full of clouds was suddenly flashed by a bolt of lightning, and the air began to become dull, as if a heavy downpour was about to come. Since ancient times, all strangers have wanted to find this treasure. It is said to have the power to defy the heavens and change fate. However, ordinary people only regarded it as a piece of jade and paid tribute to the royal family. From then on, the object was enshrined in the royal family and never saw the light of day again. Throughout the ages, many people have thought about this thing. Let alone entering the Forbidden Palace, it is useless even if you enter, because the palace is too big, with high vermilion walls, and you may not be able to see the other side even with a ladder. In order to prevent thieves and assassins, it is difficult to see even a big tree in the Forbidden Palace. It is said that such an incident happened during the Jiaqing period, when a peasant named Chenda went to assassinate the emperor. Relying on his ability to climb trees, he actually got close to Emperor Jiaqing. At the moment when he drew his sword, the guards of Xinwumen and Chenda looked at each other, and they just looked at each other. The emperor was frightened. Fortunately, he was beside him. The minister was quite responsive and quickly hugged Chenda Ki so that Emperor Jiaqing was not injured. Later, all the unnecessary trees in the Forbidden Palace were cut down, and many open and secret sentries were added. There were countless masters in the Forbidden City. From then on, no one could easily sneak into the Forbidden Palace. Until the 8 power allied forces invaded the capital, the world was in turmoil, and the Forbidden Palace opened wide. Some evil spirits finally realized the opportunity and took advantage of the chaos to sneak in and fish in troubled waters. In the end, This treasure was actually stolen. Once this thing came out, it immediately aroused competition among people all over the world. When mentioning that great battle, even though a long time had passed, Kinja couldn't help but feel a lingering fear in his heart. Different people in the world were competing for it, and masters were emerging one after another. There are many kinds of people, ranging from the masters of the three religions to the people. The old friend he talked about, Huowaji, relied on his sinister and domineering Hunyuan fire to become one of the top masters in the world. However, when fighting for the immortal treasure, he met the headmaster of the Longmen Quanzhen sect. The two of them exchanged only one move, and Huowaji was stabbed to death by a sword, and the Hunyuan fire was lost. The battle between strangers overnight changed the whole world. In the end, each sect suffered heavy casualties, and the immortal treasure was shattered, divided into four, and its whereabouts are unknown. When Su Tong heard Qianshu talk about this secret, he couldn't help but wonder. Could it be that the jade piece in his hand was a quarter of the fairy treasure? Thinking of this, he suddenly became alert and asked with a calm face, "Why have I never heard of such a big thing? The rivers and lakes are all over the rivers and lakes, and there are not many people who have survived. To put it bluntly, it's just that I didn't get the things I grabbed, and many people in my family died. Who would publicize such a thing? Now after so many years, those who know and those who don't know have almost been submerged in the wheel of time. Of course young people like you don't know." When Kinja said this, his voice under the mask actually sounded a bit proud. He was also worthy of pride. After all, at that time, his strength was barely above that of a second-rate master, and there was a huge gap between the strength of his friend Huowaji. Not to mention, those first-class masters who are stronger than Huowaji, or even super first-class masters. But now, they have long since returned to dust. How many people in the world still remember their names? He is the only one who has laughed until today, and this alone is enough for him to be proud of. Sure enough, his magical powers are unparalleled, but not as long as his longevity. Having said this, a strange chuckle came out from under the thousand hands mask. He looked sideways at Su Tong's young face and said, "Do you want to know why I can live for so long?" Su Tong thought for a while and scratched his head. "Oh, I know. So the reason why you can live so long is because..." Qianshu lowered his eyes slightly, his eyes flickering from under his eyelids. Su Tong slowly raised his head, as if there were flames beating in his pupils, as if he had found clues to his longevity from Kinja's words. "So there is only one truth, because you are a bastard." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 211. When Qianshu heard this, his muscles under his mask suddenly stiffened, and his eyes stared at him coldly. For a moment, I only heard him say coldly, "I don't know how to praise." As soon as he finished speaking, 4 black shadows came towards him like lightning. Su Tong did not move. He just let Big Fatty rush up to stop the 4 dummies. At the same time, he waved his hand and saw a shining golden figure thrown into the air by him. After activating the control technique, with a slight movement of his fingers, the little golden man spun rapidly in mid-air and headed straight for the Thousand Hands Gate. Huh! Looking at the golden villain, Kinja was stunned for a moment and didn't notice it at first, but when the villain pounced on him, Kinja realized something was wrong. Colorful play, Thousand Liang of Scales. I saw Qianshu holding the cigarette rod and sending it upward. There were golden light spots on his cigarette rod, like a star mark, like a support pole. When he pressed it with his finger, the star mark suddenly seemed to be lit up. There was a buzz of bang. The cigarette rod was pressed against the little golden man's body, and sparks exploded in the air when the two touched. Su Tong frowned, feeling as if he had hit a diamond wall. Looking at the golden light bursting from the little golden figure, he felt a sudden pain in his heart. That's all gold. Just throwing yourself at it doesn't count as gold. The key is that you can't handle the consumption of the spirit enchantment. He felt sorry for the little golden man, but he didn't know that Jianshu himself also felt sorry for his cigarette stick. After a closer look, he just banged it, causing a thumb-sized hole to break open in his cigarette stick. Paper control. Boy, what is your relationship with the Wang family? Qinzhou has lived for so long, and he once paid homage to Sichuan Plum Blossom Manor. It was an ancient manor left by Taoist Mai Hua, and there were many skilled paper makers in it. So when I saw Su Tong's paper control skills, I couldn't help but feel shocked. When I took a closer look at Big Fatty, I could vaguely grasp the kid's heels. It's a pity that Jianshu likes to play riddles, and Su Tong also likes it. He grinned, guess. As he spoke, he seemed to flick the air a few times with his fingers, causing the little golden man to rush forward again. Jianshu's expression became unnatural now. He originally came to Plum Blossom Manor because of rumors in the world that the four small yins were the inheritance of Plum Blossom Taoist. Who this Plum Blossom Taoist is will be discussed in detail later. It's just that his original purpose of sneaking into Plum Blossom Manor was to control paper. It was a pity that he later found out that the sect was introduced to a member of the Wang family. He searched hard for a long time but could not find it. Unexpectedly, this craftsmanship fell into the hands of this boy. He was surprised at Su Tong's endless tricks, but when he saw the paper control technique, he already concluded that Su Tong's heels must be descendants of the Wang family of paper makers. Thinking of this, Jianshu didn't want to fight with him anymore, and turned his palm into a fist and struck hard through the air, knocking the little golden man away, and then jumped up. The arm tore off the camouflage of the coat, revealing a yellow monk's robe with a scarlet cassock, exposing half of his chest and right arm, revealing his smooth and strong muscles in the air. Rumble, rumble. The dull air in the sky once again burst into a flash of lightning, and large raindrops suddenly began to fall. But before the rainwater could touch the cassock on Qinzhou's body, it was shaken away by an invisible force. Su Tong's pupils tightened, and the aura of Qinzhou, who had torn off the disguise in front of him, suddenly increased several levels. If the two of them had just fought, Qinzhou's aura was just like a hill, but now, it has at least turned into a big mountain. I didn't expect you to be a monk. Su Tong couldn't help but feel deeply surprised when he saw 1,000 hands falling lightly on the ground. Under the mask, the eyes of Jianshao shone with golden light. I have worshipped Buddhism twice. I dare not say that I have read a few Buddhist scriptures, but I have also mastered the secrets of Buddhism. Otherwise, how could Zhang Yang obey my orders? Seeing that 1,000 hands seemed to be making serious moves, Su Tong did not dare to be careless and glanced sideways at the fat man. I saw that the big fat one was fighting against 4, and it was obviously a little overwhelmed. It was not in good condition. It had been burned by Zhang Yang before, and it helped him withstand the terrible flying needle attack. At this time, facing the siege of 4 guys who looked like puppets, centipede-like cracks began to appear in many places on his body. Seeing this, he simply took back the big fat man and the little golden man, opened his hands, and arched his legs slightly, like a dormant cheetah, his eyes locked on Qinzhou. At this moment, the 1,000-handed man had already leapt towards Su Tong. The blood-red cassock unfolded in mid-air, with his hands spread out in a domineering manner, and the aura that seemed like 5 mountains crashing down on him made Su Tong's heart beat faster. But he did not choose to dodge, but chose to confront him head-on. He also wanted to see how strong this big man who survived the Republic of China was. Looking at the palm falling in the air, Su Tong stepped on a pool of water. The water splashed in all directions and was quickly absorbed by the extremely absorbent pure cotton pants. The moment the coolness of the rain dripped down his pants, it was instantly evaporated into white mist like vapor by a dark blue flame. What's even more terrifying is that the blue firelight instantly covered Su Tong's body, and the rain falling from the sky was quickly evaporated and disappeared. The moment he jumped up, he was as fast as a blue leopard jumping out of the clouds. Demon had arrived. Su Tong was like a demon king waking up from hell. His speed was beyond the range of normal humans, and his hands seemed to be waving a flaming demon dragon down. The earth and rocks shattered, and the two of them were shaken violently. The rain around them suddenly evaporated like mist, and everything around them was vast. On the rooftop in the distance, the urging man who had almost fought with Su Tong just now saw this and couldn't help but clenched his hands tightly into fists. Such terrifying strength made him murmur in his heart, and he tried to bring himself in, but the result was that there was actually a trace of fear in my heart. Fortunately, it was completely white in front of him, so he could not clearly see the battle inside. He could only hear the roar of the beast-like fists under the thunderstorm. It was hard to tell whether it was the sound of thunder or the sound of fists breaking through the wind. The battle did not last long, not even 10 seconds. I saw a black light flying out of the water mist, rolling on the ground in embarrassment. Who is it? Mr. Urgent's pupils tightened and he quickly looked carefully. When he saw it was Su Tong, Mr. Urgent's face did not relax. Instead, he frowned. Trash. As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Urgent suddenly noticed something. When he turned around, he found Qianshu standing on the roof behind him, with his hands on his back, his right hand on his left hand, the two thumbs connected, and he silently recited the Vajra Sutra, and appeared behind him. A phantom of an angry-eyed King Kong appeared. If you are someone who knows something about Zen Buddhism, you will be able to call it out. This is the Dharma of Angry Eyes Vajra. The mudra formed by 1,000 hands is the Vajra seal in the secret method of Zen. It is said that when you practice this mudra to the extreme, you can enter the realm of Superman. Su Tong didn't know to what extent Qianshu had practiced this Vajra seal, but he was at least certain that even the monks in the Shaolin temple who had practiced hard for decades would find it difficult to reach this level. Because in the fight just now, with the help of the Vajra Dharma, the Demon King's arrival was actually shaken away, and because the dark physique was restrained, he actually suffered a big loss. But the strange thing is that after 1,000 hands injured Su Tong, he stopped taking action. He closed his hands and put away the Dharma image, and the voice under the mask became sharp and slender again. There are 2 months until the Mid-Autumn Festival on August 15th. If you are still alive by then, you can come to Bamang Yingyun Peak to find me. I will give you a chance by then, provided that your kid is still alive. After Kinja finished speaking, he raised his head and looked at the place where Mr. Urgent was hiding. Even though he was more than 100 meters away, when he saw Kinja's eyes sweeping towards him, Mr. Urgent could not help but be startled. Unexpectedly, he was so far away, his hiding place has been exposed. What's even more surprising is that Kinja glanced at him, then looked at the tree crown not far away on the other side, and waved his hand, Zahu. As he spoke, he slapped his waist with his palm, and the surrounding silk threads that were difficult to discern with the naked eye were quickly put into a round box on his waist. At the same time, a black shadow jumped down from the tree crown, like a flying goose, disappearing into the night in 2 or 3 steps. Han Jianglong. Mr. Urgent was instantly startled and broke out in a cold sweat. He was discovered by Kinju. He was not surprised. After all, the strength of this old monster was unfathomable. However, he did not expect that Han Jianglong was hiding not far from him. He actually not found at all. Sir, let's go quickly, we have business to do. While he was stunned, the voice of 1,000 hands came to Mr. Urging's ears. This undoubtedly caused a storm in his heart. The Taoist magical power can transmit sounds thousands of miles away. Hiss. Taking a deep breath of air conditioning, Mr. Urging's little Jeju disappeared immediately. He glanced at Su Tong again and couldn't help but laugh at himself. He felt that he was no different from trash. He turned around and stepped on the mud tiles of the roof and left quickly. After the three people left, Su Tong slowly stood up and patted the mud off his body. He didn't look injured at all, but he couldn't help but secretly cursed in his heart, old treacherous and cunning. In fact, although he was hit hard, he was not seriously injured. He deliberately looked weak. Just when he was waiting for Thousand Hands to rush up to hit him, he directly activated the Dark Lord to counterattack. As a result, the old thief seemed to be aware of the danger and actually ran away in a pretentious manner. Not only did he walk gracefully, he also surprised the other two companions by surprise. However, he didn't dare to stay any longer. The noise just made would definitely attract interested people to observe. He was injured, and continuing to stay would only increase the danger. He immediately took out the jack mask and put it on his head, transformed into a long-lasting appearance, turned around and walked quickly into the alley. However, on the other side of the building, when the old storyteller was talking so loudly, someone suddenly came up to the stage and thrust a note into the old man's hand under the cover of sending flowers. The old gentleman opened the note calmly, glanced up from the corner of his eye, his face suddenly changed, he shook a few times, then a mouthful of blood spurted out, and he rolled down from the high platform. This made everyone below panic, and they hurriedly came over to take a look. They saw that the old gentleman was still holding the blood-stained note tightly in his hand. Some people were curious and picked up the note and took a look, only to see that it said with two words, "Wrong." Note: because there was a problem in the last update, I should not have written something, which resulted in the plot needing to be corrected. Although it has been released, there were big flaws in my next plot, so I will update it today. I have to reorganize the copy outline, sorry. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 212. The night was rushing by, it was almost 10 p.m., and the sound of an alarm bell broke the tranquility of the street. Su Tong stood in the corner and saw several police officers walking out of Fenglai building, followed by several people carrying a stretcher and putting a body on the funeral home's car. I could vaguely hear a crowd of people whispering inside, all of them feeling sorry for and horrified by the sudden death of this gentleman. Died. He listened carefully, and when he learned that the deceased was actually the old storyteller, a look of surprise appeared on his face. After hearing it again, I found that the old gentleman's death was even more bizarre. Just because he vomited blood and died after seeing the word "wrong" written on the note. In confusion, Su Tong suddenly saw a familiar figure. His eyes lit up and he walked into the crowd. If I had known, I wouldn't have worked the night shift. I would have had to come in for the autopsy in the middle of the night. In front of Fenglai building, Chen Jian was holding a cigarette in his hand and his mouth was full of complaints. When he was complaining about his bad luck, he suddenly felt someone pulling him. When I looked back, I saw a stranger. He couldn't help but look up and down. Is something wrong? Chen Jian is a tough-looking guy with a dark face and big eyes. If he were to stare at him, an ordinary person would be shocked. But the person pulling him at this moment was none other than Su Tong, who was staring at the handsome face. "Yes, you come with me." As Su Tong said, he didn't care about anything and grabbed his arm and walked out. When Chen Jian saw this, he shook his hands and wanted to shake him off, but he didn't want to shake his hands. I was suddenly startled. Just when I was about to call someone, I saw Su Tong turned around and said, "Your friend Zhao Jian asked me to come over and ask you a few words." Zhao Jian. Where did this kid go? Upon hearing Zhao Jian's name, Chen Jian's eyes suddenly lit up, and he grabbed Su Tong's wrist, as if he was afraid that he would run away. "Don't be anxious, don't be anxious." Su Tong pulled Chen Jian to a corner and whispered, he knew he was in trouble, so he hid. "How is the situation?" "Hey. This Xingqiu is a good player. He has the nerve to hide. If you find him, you have to beat him up." Chen Jian cursed and complained. Because of what happened last time, the captain was transferred to the second team and now became the second captain. Although he was not demoted, the treatment of the second team was very different from that of the first team. For example, today's matter was something that an ordinary policeman on duty could do, but he had to take a turn. As for Zhao Jian's punishment decision, it has naturally come out and he has been dismissed from all his positions. It is said that Zhao Jian's family even called and said clearly that Zhao Jian would be severely punished, but in turn they hoped that the bureau's network open one side. The original intention of the bureau was to keep him on duty for observation, but this guy suddenly disappeared. As a result, the leaders of the bureau immediately became angry. No one was willing to give him any face, so he was dismissed from his post. However, the fact that Ni Wenchao was transferred to the second team was not unjust. After all, it was his work mistakes that allowed Zhang Yang to find the opportunity to kill Songbao's Hung. If the bureau doesn't protect him in this matter, the second team probably won't even think about it and just take a deputy position. Su Tong actually didn't care about what was going on in the game. Seeing that Chen Jian was almost done complaining, he asked in a low voice, "Brother, what's going on inside this time? Why did the old man die suddenly? How did the forensics test?" Chen Jian frowned. Although he was a tiger, he was not a fool. He immediately turned cold and said, "Why are you asking about this? What does this case have to do with you?" Zhao Jian said, "You are his good brother. Your name is Chen Jian. When he calls Zhao Jian, you are a good brother. It is not convenient for him to come forward, so he asked me to ask you." He. Chen Jian curled his lips in disdain, obviously not believing his words. Su Tong could only whisper a few words in Chen Jian's ear. When Chen Jian heard this, his face became strange. After a moment, he frowned and said, "The deceased person's name was Li Gao, and he was the storyteller here. The forensic doctor determined that he died of myocardial infarction, which is a disease, and there was nothing else. Since he is the storyteller stationed in the store, he is considered half an employee. If the employee dies, have you met the boss of Feng Lelu?" "No. They said the boss went away yesterday, and we only saw the shopkeeper." Chen Jian nodded and said without hiding anything. Su Tong frowned. Normally, if someone died in the store, even if it was a sudden death, the boss should come out and give an explanation. But he ended up traveling far away by such a coincidence. He wouldn't believe this. Thinking of this, he lowered his voice and said, "Check the bottom of this Fenglai building. This store is not simple. There must be something behind it." When Chen Jian heard this, he refused without thinking, "No, just check if you say you want." I said, "No, if you want me to check, find this bastard Zhao Jian and see me and I will check." "Meet him." Su Tong's furrowed brows opened and his eyes narrowed when he heard this, and he asked, "Then what do you plan to do when you see him?" "Beat him," Chen Jian said with his fists clenched. Su Tong nodded and pointed forward, "Look, isn't he right over there?" Chen Jian quickly looked back, only to see that Zhao Jian was not there at all in the crowd. "Where? Why didn't I look?" Before he finished speaking, his shoulders suddenly sank and he was pulled back. When he turned around, he saw Zhao Jian's face looking at him with a smile. "Remember, check it out for me. If you find out any information, send it to the small beef offal soup shop outside the drum tower in the east." Chen Jian was stunned for a moment, and was about to get angry, but he didn't know that an iron fist hit him in front of him, and his vision suddenly went dark, and he was knocked unconscious to the ground. "Hey, I wasted another mask. Fortunately, I bought more when I came in, otherwise I wouldn't be able to bear such a waste." Looking at Chen Jian, who fell to the ground, Su Tong looked at the jack mask in his hand with regret, sighed, shouted to the crowd, then quickly turned around and walked into the alley and disappeared into the crowd. When he returned home, before he entered the gate of the Taoist temple, he happened to meet Chang Miao, who was returning from defecating outside. Chang Miao was in a particularly good mood. As soon as she saw Su Tong, she enthusiastically walked up to him and showed off to him, "From today on, the shit in the villages in the west belongs to me. What do you think? Do you want to do it with me? If you poop for a while longer, we'll swallow the shit in the east district too." The corner of Su Tong's mouth twitched a few times and he quickly shook his head. "Sorry, I don't have such a big appetite. TCH. Young." Chang Miao shook her head and said with an experienced attitude, "Don't think that poop is too smelly. Let me tell you, poop is a good thing, and you can make a lot of money selling it as fertilizer." After Chang Miao finished speaking, she started to count on her fingers. She could earn 10 cents from one load of dung. If she hauled 5 loads of dung a day, she could still save some for fertilizing her own land. She could also buy some more yellow tomatoes. Money. Seeing this, Su Tong could only sigh in his heart. Sure enough, the legend may not be entirely true. He ignored Chang Miao's thoughts on his feces business and went back to the room. As a result, I was shocked as soon as I entered the door. I saw that the fool was still sleeping soundly in his room, and the slurs from the corners of his mouth were dripping on the pillow. I remember that before I went out, I reminded him to stay in the Taoist temple. Unexpectedly, the fool simply slept in his room. After helping the fool to cover himself with the quilt again, he took off his shirt and looked down, only to see that his chest was red and a big slap mark was imprinted on it. As soon as my fingers touched it, I immediately felt a burning pain. Phew! Trouble! Seeing this, Su Tong secretly complained in his heart. He thought Kinju had such a high prestige in Shiju that he should be a master of the evil way, or at the worst, a big boss in Shiju. Who knows, this guy actually has Buddhist magical powers, and he is not a dabbler like Zhang Yang or Mr. Ji Ming. He is a real master who has mastered Buddhist magical powers. In reality, this kind of person would be considered an eminent monk. However, his dark physique was restrained by Jian Shu, and he immediately suffered a big loss in a head-on confrontation. But having said that, I feel uncomfortable, and Kinju may not be much better than me, otherwise he would not be afraid of his own backhand and choose to leave. Calling out the prop book, Su Tong rummaged around and found the jar of ointment 100 Chong Huoxiu juice that he had bought from Shen Miao in the second script world, took out a little of it and applied it on his chest. 100 Chong Huoxiu juice, from Chapter 22 of Volume 2. The preparation method is unknown, and it is a secret medicine of the Miao people. How to use: apply to the wound to quickly stop bleeding and gain 200% recovery effect for 30 minutes. Note, it is a 3-part poison. If used too much, symptoms of blood fever will occur. After applying the medicine, it felt like holding a boiled egg in my arms, warm and comfortable. But just when he was sitting on the chair, about to pick up the hookah and take a puff, his expression suddenly changed, and he saw that there was still a trace of black gas coming out of the area where the ointment was applied on his abdomen. Warning: you have been attacked by a special spell. This attack is a special spell and requires special means to dispel it. Please find it yourself. Su Tong was speechless when he heard the reminder from the prop book, but he had no time to take care of it at this time. I saw traces of black energy pouring out from my chest, and actually turned into a villain in front of me. The villain's face is blurred and his facial features cannot be seen clearly, and he sits cross-legged in the air with his knees crossed. What is this? Looking at the villain in front of him, Su Tong stretched out his hand, and blue flames ignited in his palm, hoping to use the power of the devil to destroy the villain. However, when he grabbed it with one hand, he realized that he had missed it, and the devil's flame was unable to cause any harm to the villain. Suddenly he was shocked, and he quickly took out the magic bell and pointed it at the villain a few times, but the result was even more disappointing to him. It was still useless. At this time, the villain actually slowly fell down, as if he was about to sit in his arms. Su Tong's face turned cold when he saw this, and three words suddenly came to his mind: sitting on the ferry pole. Suddenly a chill came over him, and just as the villain was about to sit in his arms, a dark hand suddenly came out from behind him, grabbed the villain's head, and then pulled him back. Ah! Su Tong clutched his chest and fell to the ground, as if someone had dug out a piece of flesh in his chest. The pain made his eyes black. When he looked behind him, he saw that the fool had woken up without knowing when, clutching his hand. The villain stuffed it into his mouth, his eyes glowing red, and he sat on the bed like an evil ghost, making a sharp and weird laugh while eating. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 213. One of the five evils is committed, three deficiencies are committed on the second, 3 souls are removed from 1, 6 souls are removed from 2, eliminate evil spirits, balance yin and yang, regulate the 5 elements, suppress 8 evil spirits, 3 evil spirits and 5 diseases. Early the next morning, Su Tong sat in the yard, holding a bowl of hot soy milk in one hand and a book in the other. He read the information about the village guardians and pondered in his heart. Thousands of hands, an old bastard, actually hid something, and almost followed in his master's footsteps. No wonder he vowed to come to Eagle Cloud Peak to find him in 2 months. I am afraid that the old guy will be waiting for me to come to beg him when the time comes. I was just afraid that Senja never dreamed that he would be blessed with great fortune, and that there would be a village guard behind him to protect him, and he would eat up the Black Shadow. Of course, Su Tong himself did not expect this. He had doubted the authenticity of the village guard before, thinking that what he said was too evil, until last night the fool swallowed the little black man directly, lay down on the bed and fell asleep. It was only this morning when he touched the idiot's forehead with his hand that he discovered that the idiot actually had a high fever, and his head was burning to his hands. He gave him antipyretic medicine, but it had no effect at all. He could only use a cold towel to physically cool down. As a result, he spent the whole night of no use at all. Until the morning, the fool suddenly burped and spit out a cloud of black gas. After that, his body temperature returned to normal. Now the fool is still sleeping soundly on his bed. This inevitably made Su Tong wonder in his heart, and he became even more curious about the village guards, but the description of the village guards in Mr. Song's book only had this paragraph. He held the book and read this paragraph, looking left and right. After reading for a long time, he couldn't find any clue. Until I heard the snoring of the fool, I ran back and took a look at the fool who was sleeping soundly. There were tears at the corners of his mouth, and he was still muttering, "Snacks, delicious." Seeing this, he walked out of the room and took another look at the book in his hand. There were only 2 words between the lines: kindness. It seems that fools are the nemesis of sitting on the immortal pile. This is really unexpected. Su Tong felt relieved and a smile appeared on his face. This was a blessing in disguise. Not only was he not harmed by Kinja's immortal stand, but he also knew how to break the immortal stand. Now he no longer has to worry about the future. The master was plotted against by the old thief Senju. With nothing to worry about and feeling refreshed, Su Tong was in a good mood even though his injury had not yet healed. He ate a bowl of hot soy milk and deep-fried dough sticks and fell asleep while lying on the chair. He didn't wake up until the sun hit him at noon, making his skin hot. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the fool had woken up and was squatting in the corner by himself, playing happily with 2 leaves in his hands. When I looked again, I found that I was actually covered with a blanket. I knew it was a fool who did it without even thinking about it. Although I was sweating from the heat, my heart was still warm. When he found out that Su Tong was awake, the fool immediately came over and giggled. "Stop eating snacks, I'll take you to a restaurant in the city." Su Tong threw the blanket on the chair, took the fool to the sink, washed his face and hands, and pulled him out. "On the one hand, I want to repay the favor. After all, if I hadn't been a fool last night, I would probably feel uncomfortable now. On the other hand, I was also hungry. It was already noon, and Chang Miao was still working on his shit empire plan. I couldn't wait for him, so I took Fool to the city for a good meal first. The two of them walked along the path towards the city. On the way, Su Tong tentatively asked the Fool if he had a name. But the Fool just laughed happily, and Su Tong also started to giggle when he saw this. He was also a fool, so why would he ask this if he had nothing to do? It was just like someone asking if he was crazy. No matter if he has a name or not, just be happy. L City is called the Divine Capital because it was once the center of Central Plains culture. But to him, this is a city of gourmet food. When the two arrived in the old city, Su Tong took the Fool and went straight to the Zhendong Hotel. There are many restaurants in L City, but at this moment, the most famous one in L City is only this really different hotel. When the doorman saw Su Tong coming, he immediately stepped forward. However, he glanced sideways at the Fool being pulled by Su Tong behind him and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Su Tong didn't give him the chance to look down on others. This is my long-lost brother. We finally got together today and gave me a private room. Ouch. This is a happy occasion for you, please give me a private room upstairs. The waiter wasn't stupid either. Seeing that Su Tong was wealthy and acted like he was coming to spend money, what else could he say? Besides, he was sitting in a private room and it wouldn't disturb other guests, so of course there was no problem. After sitting in the private room, Su Tong didn't even look at the menu and asked the waiter to just serve a whole table of water banquets. The waiter just thought he was rich and not afraid of waste, so he turned around and went to order the food. For you. Su Tong sat down and handed an iron box to the Fool. The Fool opened it and saw that there was only a little pig made of yellow paper in the box. What made him even more happy was that the little pig could actually move. Seeing the piggy dancing in the box, the Fool was so happy. Seeing the smile on the Fool's face, Su Tong couldn't help but smile on his face, as if the Fool's smile was contagious. As for why the pig Taoist in the box doesn't smile, I don't know. The Fool was having fun holding the iron box. Su Tong walked to the window and looked at the scene outside the restaurant. On the relatively spacious street, there is no scene of busy traffic in the future, but you can see the scene of everyone wearing neat white shirts and riding bicycles on the street. Bang bang bang. There was a knock on the door. Su Tong frowned, and when he looked back, he saw that the person who opened the door was not the person serving the food, but an old man wearing a straw hat. As soon as the Fool saw the outsider, he immediately threw Master Zuzu back into the iron box, then closed the lid, hugged the iron box tightly in his arms, and stared at the old man with a wary face. Hey, hello, my surname is Pu Ming Dongshan, you can just call me Lao Dongzi. I just heard from the waiter that you are very happy today, so I would like to say congratulations to you first. The old man cupped his hands towards Su Tong, glanced at the Fool again from the corner of his eye, and then said, Sir, on such a happy day, would you like the old man to take the girl to sing a verse for you? It doesn't cost any money. If you think the singing is good, just enjoy the meal. Su Tong understood it as soon as he heard it. He raised his hands, raised his thumbs to the left and right, arched his hands towards the old man and said, I'm sorry, let's move the beam and install it. You're welcome. Friends from Jianghu, you're welcome to eat with chopsticks. The old man was stunned for a moment when he heard this, and quickly raised his hands to apologize and said with a smile, Sir, you are a real Jianghu person, I am not. I understand what you said, but if you ask me to say it, I can't do it either. The old man was not a Jianghu person. He could understand Su Tong's meaning, but he didn't dare to pretend to be a Jianghu person. This kind of thing is not a joke. The dumpling is broken and the filling is exposed. When Su Tong heard this, he nodded and said, Okay, there's no need to sing. We're all just for food. I've ordered a lot of dishes today. You can come in with your children to eat. Hey, you are a great benevolent person. I wish you smooth sailing, 2 dragons soaring, 3 sons prospering, 4 seasons of peace, 5 blessings coming to your door, 6 and 6 fortunes, 7 stars shining brightly, wealth coming from all directions, 99 hearts united, and perfect. Good guy, if this old man doesn't open his mouth, it's okay. When he does, he'll just rhyme. At Su Tong's signal, the old man called in the girl holding an erhu outside the door. The girl was only 11 or 12 years old. She was fair and clean, with a small nose and big eyes. Her long black hair was braided. When she entered, she was greeted by Su Tong first. Tong bowed. After he examined the girl and then looked at the old man, he suddenly understood. Old men who sell songs in restaurants are actually very unpleasant. It is common for them to be kicked out by customers. If a girl is not allowed to come in first, she is afraid that the girl will not be able to bear the scolding, or that the unscrupulous customers will take the opportunity to tease her. It can be seen that the old man would rather lose his face than let his daughter suffer any injustice. Before the food was served, the old man asked the girl to sing a song to celebrate the family joy. Only when Su Tong nodded did he dare to sit down. After the old man sat down, he glanced at the fool again, hesitated for a moment, and whispered, "Master, I think you are a good person, your brother, Su Tong raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "What's wrong with my brother?" I told you not to blame me." The old man looked embarrassed, gritted his teeth, and said, "This brother of yours is not a mortal. You don't have much time with him. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 214. When Su Tong heard what the old man said, his face turned cold at first, but soon returned to normal. Even if it was just for a moment, the old man could see clearly. After the old man finished speaking, he paused deliberately, waiting to see if Su Tong would get angry. If he did, he would get up and leave. It was his fault that Meng Lang was overly happy and forgot the truth behind simple words. But Su Tong didn't get angry after all, because he knew that he and the fool were not from the same world after all, and would be separated sooner or later. He just listened to the old man's words, and there seemed to be other reasons. He picked up the teapot on the table and made half a cup of tea for the old man. He picked up the cup and said, "Old man, please give me some advice. It's disrespectful to replace wine with tea." Seeing that Su Tong didn't get angry, the old man felt relieved. Even though he didn't dare to say anything, he took a sip of tea and then said in a low voice, "3 shortcomings and 5 shortcomings. 3 souls go away. Although your brother is crazy, it's silly, but it's also a blessing. The village guards don't have to worry about eating or drinking. You still know this?" Su Tong was shocked. Most of the things he didn't see were what he saw in books. How could this old man see it at a glance? "I am not a Jianghu person, but I have also been in the Jianghu." The old man grinned and lifted up his trousers. Su Tong saw that the old man's left leg was actually a prosthetic leg. It turns out to be Senior Su Tong handed over his hand again. "I don't dare to take it, I don't dare to take it." The old man waved his hand quickly, then changed his voice and pointed at the fool sitting next to his granddaughter holding an iron box. Although the village guard is stupid, he is also a registered person under the city god. When he has accumulated enough merits, the city god will take him back and reincarnate. Look at the red light surging on this little brother's seal. I'm afraid the merits must be enough quickly, and those who do good deeds will be rewarded in the next life. When Su Tong heard this, he looked back and saw that the fool's forehead was indeed much rosier than that of ordinary people, and it really gave people a special feeling. He didn't doubt the old man's words, because he remembered what Zhou Huazheng said in the second script world. Whether it is Taoism, Buddhism, or even any mainstream religion in the world, in the end, what they seek is not life, but death. A way of death that is difficult for normal people to understand, such as Taoist enlightenment and Buddhist nirvana, to complete the last step of life's goal, perfection. Then how long do you think my brother has left? Su Tong's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't live without Fool now. Whether it was out of selfishness or reluctance, Fool was a trump card. Especially in the future, the master would be plotted by a fairy stake. Only a village guard like Fool could crack it. When it comes to finding other village guardians, it is difficult to find them on the one hand, but what if they are found? On the other hand, if you find someone, they may not be willing to help you. So if possible, he didn't want the Fool to leave him, at least not for now. Well, it depends on fate. The old man touched his beard. He could only see so much. No matter how much he knew, he couldn't say anything. He could only say that it depends on the Fool's luck. If he is lucky, he may just do a good deed after going out and it will be complete. If he is unlucky, he may have to wait several years before he meets the opportunity that makes him happy. So, Su Tong's eyes flashed, and he finally let out a long sigh, although he had ways to satisfy the delaying Fool, such as locking him up in a dark place, so that he would not have that chance. But he couldn't do such a thing. As the old man said, everything can only depend on fate. While the two were talking, the banquet and food had already begun to be served. Su Tong wanted to treat the old man and the others to eat more, but he didn't expect the old man to take out a bowl himself, put some food in the bowl with serving chopsticks, and then stood up to leave. Su Tong hurriedly wanted to stay, but the old man handed over his hand and said, "Master, you are very happy today. This little old man is just bringing bad luck here. This meal should be regarded as a reward for the little old man. Our mountains will remain green and the water will flow forever. If you need a place where I can be useful to you in the future, you can look for me on the outskirts of the city at the intersection of Huayuan Road." This. Su Tong could also see that even though this old man was not a person in the world, he was by no means an ordinary person. Just when he was about to take out some money, the old man saw the insight and quickly covered his hand and said, "No, I have no chance of wealth in this life, I will be satisfied to have descendants." As he spoke, the old man glanced at the girl, the nasolabial folds at the corners of his eyes were squeezed together, and there was indescribable doting in his eyes. When Su Tong saw this, he understood and no longer wanted to keep the old man. After the two people left, he sat on the chair and frowned. He glanced at the Fool for a while and saw that he was still waiting for him eagerly. He curled his lips and said, "What do you want? Eat quickly. Eat and drink enough. Let's go to the bathhouse, let me give you a good bath." Not to mention Su Tong's side, in a broken courtyard on the other side, a group of people were sitting under the shade of a tree and eating watermelon. This group of people was none other than Mr. Ji Ming, Monk Ming, and others. While everyone was eating the melon, they heard a violent sound of retching coming from the house behind them. Everyone paused for a moment and waited until the sound of retching was over before continuing to eat. Buzz. Not long after, the door was pushed open, and a young man dressed in black and lightly dressed walked out of the house. The young man came to the crowd, took out a piece of paper, glanced at the people in front of him, flipped through it, and handed the paper to Monk Ming. "Let the pharmacy prepare the medicine according to the prescription." Monk Ming took it and looked at the prescription. He raised his brows slightly, and before everyone could see clearly what medicine was written on it, he quickly stuffed it into his arms. After taking 2 mouthfuls of watermelon, he stood up and walked out. The head injury was serious this time. The speaker's feet were wrapped in gauze. He was the ghost porter who was severely injured by Su Tong using paper nails and salt. He said that he did not forget to glance at the person behind him. Room. Upon seeing this, Mr. Urgent asked, "It's strange. When I came back last night, my head and face didn't look injured. Why did I suddenly vomit blood in the middle of the night?" The young man didn't respond to this. He sat down and picked up a piece of watermelon and started eating it. On a hot day, eating cold watermelon in your mouth is the best way to cool down. Seeing that he didn't speak, Mr. Urgent simply stood up and said, "Let me take a look." As a result, just when he was about to take a step, the young man spit out a watermelon seed, and with a bang, a small hole as big as a thumb was made in front of the urging man's foot. This made Mr. Urging, who had his other foot raised in the air, his face flicker in and out, his body did not move, and he looked askance at the young man. After a while, the young man said calmly, "Tou said, he has relapsed and needs to rest for a few days. Anyone who dares to disturb him will be made into a puppet." After hearing this, Mr. Urgent took his feet back, and his face finally became less ugly than before. "This is for you. I want you to go to Feng Lai Tower and tell the shopkeeper to spread the news that the boy may have fragments of fairy treasures on his body. If necessary, we can work together to get rid of this boy. I don't want to see him again." As the young man spoke, he handed a dark wooden sign to Mr. Ji Ming. When he saw the wooden sign, Mr. Ji Ming's eyes lit up. This was Feng Lai Lu's tea sign. It seemed inconspicuous, but with this sign, he could go up. On the third floor, I saw the unpredictable big shot, the big boss behind Feng Lelu. This is an opportunity that comes only once and for all. Rumor has it that anyone who can meet the big boss can exchange this tea card for 2 things with the big boss. Since the young man only said one thing, the remaining thing can naturally be understood as a reward for himself. At this moment, Mr. Urging's discomfort disappeared and he shouted into the room, "Boss, I'm going right now." After saying that, he ignored Han Zhonglong and the ghost porter and walked out of the yard. Han Zhonglong was still eating the melon, eating very slowly, but he placed every watermelon seed neatly on the table. The ghost porter seemed to have noticed something, but he didn't dare to say anything or ask. He could only bury his head in eating the watermelon until it was all gone. Han Zhonglong took out a wad of banknotes and continued, "To the west of the drum tower, there is a medicine shop. It is a true disciple of the famous Dr. Li Zhan. Go and have a look. Don't let your feet suffer any sequelae." The ghost porter heard this without saying a word, wiped it on his clothes a few times, took the money and ran out of the yard on crutches. After everyone had left, it took a while before the door was pushed open, and a man with scars on his face walked out and sat down with the help of Han Zhonglong. Cough cough cough. The man looked to be in his 40s, but his face was covered with hideous scars. In addition to knife wounds, his face was mostly burned by fire. His mouth is crooked and his eyes are slanted, and he looks neither human nor ghost. No wonder he wears a mask to show off to others. It's so quiet now that they're all gone. After Qianshu finished speaking, he couldn't help coughing a few more times, and his eyes became sinister for a moment. "This kid can't be kept. I originally wanted to torture him for a while by sitting on a fairy stake, and let him beg me on his own, but I didn't expect that he would actually give it to me. Broken. God's calculations are not as good as those of man. Even though Thousand Hands calculated for a long time, he did not expect that his immortal stand was actually cracked. You must know that when the master passed down this trick, he passed away without even having time to tell himself the method of cracking it. He didn't even know how to break the immortal pillar, but it was actually broken by a boy of unknown origin. If he couldn't kill him now, once he spread the method of breaking it, he would be passive. You must know that last night when he noticed that the immortal pillar was broken, he immediately suffered a backlash and almost lost his life. Fortunately, he brought a few life-saving pills to stabilize his internal injuries. If it happened again, he would be considered an immortal. The treasure protector will also die. Han Zhonglong on the side lowered his head and said nothing. His cold face never showed a second expression. After listening to Qianshu's words, he stood up and wanted to walk out. A big hand grabbed him, and when he looked back, he saw Qianju squinting one eye and smiling. "Don't worry, you can't do anything yet, I want to keep you for great use." As he spoke, he slowly lay down on the chair. At this moment, a cool breeze blew. Qianshu took a deep breath and said, "The tree is still and the wind is blowing. Look, the wind is coming soon." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 215. At night, Chang Miao dragged his tired body back. He was terribly tired. Today he collected all the feces in the entire village in one go, which was enough for 8 carts of feces. That's 8 cents, plus he contracted the entire feces. There is still 25 yuan a month to collect the excrement from the village. After all, my salary next month will be almost 40 yuan at least. Chang Miao became energetic when she thought of this. She unloaded the dung cart and was about to push the door into the Taoist temple when the door of the Taoist temple in front of her was suddenly opened. Taking a closer look, Chang Miao was stunned for a moment, and saw a young man standing in front of the door. He was fair and clean, with short hair and a full of energy in his vest. She was still thinking about whose child this was, when she saw the young man grinning at him. The silly expression made Chang Miao come back to her senses. "Idiot. Hey hey." The fool nodded shyly, jumped down the steps, and ran towards the village. "Hey, I'll go, I didn't expect the fool to be quite fair." Looking at the retreating back of the fool, Chang Miao couldn't help but laugh. In the impression that the fool had never washed his face, today when he suddenly saw the fool's fair and clean appearance, he still couldn't get used to it. "Look at your arms again, they are not as white as others." Chang Miao didn't know that today Su Tong took fool to the big bathhouse behind Lijing Gate. As soon as this guy got into the water, everyone in the bathhouse collapsed, and he just fell into the pool like an ink pimple. Like a super pollutant, the pool was dyed black in 10 seconds. Su Tong also specially invited 3 masters to give him a bath. The 3 masters in the bathhouse had seen a lot, but they ended up rubbing a pound of sludge off the idiot's body. "Good guy," the 3 masters almost collapsed on the ground from exhaustion, shouting at this. "I have never been so happy in my life." After cleaning the fool, Su Tong personally trimmed the fool's hair. He also bought a new set of clothes for him. Even though Su Tong knew in his heart that this brand new clothes and shoes would probably be stained by fools before they see the sun tomorrow, but he didn't care. It's best to be happy. "Hey! Are you going out too?" At this time, Chang Miao saw Su Tong walking out from behind the Taoist temple door and couldn't help but ask. "Yes, I'll go for a walk when I'm full. I'll leave a big elbow for you, so you can eat slowly." As he said this, Su Tong naturally rode on Chang Miao's bicycle at the door and disappeared into the night. Big elbow. Chang Miao smashed his mouth. He was tired for a day, and his stomach was almost starving. When he heard the word elbow, his tongue almost drooled out. Immediately, he walked quickly to the yard and saw 2 large bowls clasped together on the table, and 4 large steamed buns on the side. "Hey hey hey, I'm coming." Not caring about washing her hands, Chang Miao opened the porcelain bowl that was upside down. When she saw, there was no big elbow inside, only the leftover bones and broth. Seeing this, Chang Miao was stunned for a moment, and she was suddenly disappointed. She thought it was meat, but only bones were left, and her face immediately fell. "But looking at the broth in the bowl, I still couldn't help but spit out my mouth, so I just ate the broth and the steamed buns." After 4 big steamed buns, there was no trace of the broth in the bowl, not to mention the broth. Chang Miao used the last bite of steamed bun as a dish towel to wipe away the grease in the bowl, and then put it in her mouth. Patting his belly, a look of satisfaction appeared on his face. Just think of it as a big meal tonight. Thinking about it, he picked up the bowl and chopsticks and planned to go to the kitchen. As soon as he picked up the bowl, a piece of paper floated under it. He picked it up and took a look. The meat is warm in the pot, don't eat too many steamed buns. Looking at the note, and then at the steamed buns that she had finished eating, Chang Miao was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly burped. Belch. When he looked into the kitchen, he found that there was indeed a large, shiny elbow in the pot, and his whole body felt bad instantly. Okay, I can only sleep on my elbows tonight. Chang Miao felt helpless when she thought that a bowl of hot elbow could only be eaten tomorrow morning. Bang! Suddenly there was a movement in his ear, and an unusual sound made him alert. Listen carefully, and there was a subtle knocking sound. The sound was very small. If he hadn't had super hearing, he probably wouldn't have been able to hear such a small sound. Mouse. Chang Miao glared out of the corner of her eyes. This pot of elbows was right here. If she was killed by a rat, she wouldn't regret it to death. He picked up the rolling pin beside the table and walked over to follow the sound. He saw an iron box sitting there in the corner. The sound he heard came from this iron box. Hiss. This box. Chang Miao had a vague impression. Could it be that a fool had left the mouse in there? The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Only a fool could do such a thing. Thinking of this, he threw the rolling pin aside, picked up the box, put it to his ear and shook it vigorously a few times. The thumping noise inside didn't sound like a rat. Out of curiosity, Chang Miao opened the box, only to see a pig made of yellow paper appear in front of her, swaying in the box as if she was drunk. She shook her head and settled down. God, then he raised his head and danced towards Chang Miao. Chang Miao had never seen this before, and was immediately frightened. He immediately threw his hands away, including the box and the pig, and threw them all into the brazier aside. Walk slowly. Looking at the figure walking out of the door, Wang Gong felt relieved. He looked at the time and saw that it was only 1 o'clock in the morning. In just a short time, he had already sent away the third wave of guests. At this time, there was no one in the store, and it was finally clear. People stood outside and looked around, muttering to themselves, why doesn't that expert come? Since he didn't deliberately drive away those guests, more and more guests have come to his door in the past 2 days, making it difficult for him to sleep well during the day recently. But the expert didn't come either, which made him feel very disappointed. Judging from the time today, he probably wouldn't come either. Thinking of this, Wang Gong sat back on his chair and picked up a newspaper. After flipping through 2 pages, I saw a line of large characters printed on the front page. Of the back page, a woman was dissatisfied with her husband's search for his mistress, cut her body into pieces, then jumped off the building with her head in her arms. Hiss. Just looking at the title, Wang Gong couldn't help but squint his eyes and thought to himself, my dear, I really have the most poisonous heart in women. When I marry a wife in the future, I must find an honest one. Just as he was about to look down, his ears moved and he heard the bell hanging on the beam of the door suddenly ring. Jingle. Wang Gong raised his head and saw a woman standing in front of him. Boss, let's have a bowl of soup. Add more chili pepper and less green onion. The woman's appearance gives people a sweet and warm feeling just like her voice. Wang Gong glanced sideways at the bell still hanging on the door beam, and couldn't help but feel sorry for such a beautiful girl. What a pity. Thinking of this, he stood up and took the banknote the girl handed him, and threw it into the trash can nearby without looking at it. Not long after, a bowl of beef offal soup covered with a thick layer of red oil and spicy seeds was delivered to the woman, and Wang Gong also gave her an extra pancake. However, the woman looked at the hot broth in front of her but did not move her chopsticks. Instead, she reached out and took Wang Gong's hand. Brother, Your house is still closed at such a late hour. Wang Gong was held by the woman's hand, but his heart skipped a beat. This was the first time he was touched by such a customer. He felt that the girl's hand was cold, as if he was holding a piece of ice. It didn't take long for his palms to freeze. Stinging. Immediately Wang Gong couldn't bear it anymore and hurriedly broke away and said with a cold face, "It's none of your business. Eat quickly. After you finish eating, leave as soon as possible. Don't delay my business. I don't know what's wrong today, my eyelids are twitching so much. Although I promised to help the master keep some guests like this, the master never comes, and I don't want to chat with these weird guests. After all, I am not Su Xian, let alone Ning Keichan. If I shake my hand, I will tremble with cold. If I go further, it will turn into a popsicle." As he said this, Wang Gong picked up a pair of chopsticks and inserted them into the sesame cakes. However, as soon as the woman stretched out her hand, she flicked the chopsticks away. She squinted at the bowl of broth on the table, and a look of boredom appeared on her slender brows. "I don't like beef offal soup, it's smelly. Why did you come in if you don't like drinking?" Wang Gong's forehead was numb for a while, and he suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He wanted to put on a casual and relaxed look on his face, but he stepped back and bumped into the counter behind him. He took the newspaper on the table and unfolded it. The muscles in Wang Gong's neck suddenly stiffened, and dense beads of sweat instantly appeared on his forehead. The cold wind blew directly on his spine, and goosebumps stood up all over his body. On the back page of the newspaper, there was a large photo printed with the words "her husband's murderer" written on it, and the woman in the photo actually looked exactly like the woman in front of her. This time, Wang Gong held the newspaper in both hands, but it began to shake uncontrollably, causing the newspaper to rattle. Seeing this, the woman stepped forward and squinted at the newspaper. "That's ugly. This is a photo of me from many years ago." After saying that, the woman stared at Wang Gong. "Look how beautiful I am now. You said I am so beautiful. Why did he go to find that vixen? Do you think he should die?" Wang Gong swallowed and looked at the woman's expression becoming more and more ferocious. Her head felt like pounded garlic, and she kept saying, "Damn it, damn it." As soon as Wang Gong finished speaking, he suddenly felt a huge pain in his arm. He saw the woman's head turning around little by little, and on the back of her head, there was actually a man's face. The man's eyes were fierce and he glared at himself. "You deserve to die if you say you should. I think you deserve to die too." After saying that, he grabbed him with one hand on his throat, and the other hand on his throat. A kitchen knife for cutting cakes. The man is committing murder, while the woman is laughing loudly from behind. But when the man raised the knife in his hand and was about to chop off Wang Gong's head, he suddenly heard a burst of laughter from behind him. "Wonderful, one head and two faces. If your wife cheats on you now, do you focus on participating or coming out? You city people really know how to play. It's exciting to think about it." The familiar voice made Wang Gong's spirit perk up. He followed the voice and found that the master had been sitting at the dining table nearby, holding the soup bowl he had just served for the woman, and was eating with relish. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 217. Grandmaster. When he saw Su Tong, Wang Gong was so excited that he almost jumped up. He didn't know where he got the strength to break away from the woman's hand, ran behind Su Tong, and pointed with his hand. They bully me." Wang Gong's aggrieved eyes were about to burst into tears. How could he not be aggrieved? He kindly gave them a bowl of soup, but they still wanted to chop him into pieces. Is there any justice for Wang Gong? Su Tong patted him on the shoulder, comforted the little brother, and handed him the half-drunk soup. "Add more soup, and add more chili." Wang Gong took the bowl and hid behind the soup pot without daring to come out. The woman looked Su Tong up and down, and then turned her head. The man turned his face, raised the kitchen knife and walked towards Su Tong. If you chop one, it's a chop. If you chop two, it's a chop. If you like soup, I'll cook you into soup tonight. Su Tong frowned as he watched the man walking over the woman's body, then raised his hand and slapped the kitchen knife before it fell. The slap was as fast as the wind, and the man's head was instantly turned into a top. He casually picked out a piece of yellow paper with his fingers. He didn't know how to fold it. He just held the yellow paper in his palm, kneaded it a few times and pinched out a little yellow duck. The duck has a small head and a big belly, and looks naive and silly. Wang Gong, who was hiding behind the soup pot, couldn't help but become suspicious when he saw this, wondering why the master was pinching the duck at this time. Just as he was feeling suspicious, he saw the master take out a bell, raised his hand to grab it, and actually grabbed the man and woman into a spherical ball and stuffed them into the duck. After a while, the duck twisted a few times and seemed to come to life. It began to roll back and forth in Su Tong's hand. If you look carefully, the outline of a human face squeezed out of the duck's belly from time to time. After a while, the original beige paper duck turned red. Is the soup ready? Wang Gong was startled by the sudden voice and hurriedly brought the soup bowl to them, but his eyes never left the pair of ducks from the beginning to the end. Throw this in the stove and burn it. Seeing Wang Gong's curious face, Su Tong threw the duck to him and motioned for him to burn the duck. Burn it? Wang Gong was stunned for a moment and looked at the duck in his hand curiously. Master? Do you really want to burn it? As he said this, Wang Gong subconsciously looked at Su Tong, but he didn't know that this look frightened him. He saw Su Tong looking at him with squinted eyes, half smiling, sticking out his tongue and licking his lips before whispering. You can keep it too. Before Wang Gong could feel secretly happy, Su Tong continued slowly. Then when they rush out of the duck, they cut you into pieces and throw them into the soup pot. Your head, arms, legs, and intestines will cook and cook with the pot. The taste will become more and more delicious. Su Tong's voice was very low, but to Wang Gong's ears, it was a different picture. In a trance, he seemed to really see the scene of a huge human head rolling out of the boiling soup in the big iron pot. For a moment, Wang Gong shivered, and his stomach couldn't stop churning. Vomit. For a while, he lay on the table and retched several times, and then he regained his breath. When he looked up again, he saw Su Tong holding a soup bowl and squinting at him. I'm burning, I'm going to burn. At this moment, the little thoughts in Wang Gong's heart suddenly disappeared, and he no longer dared to think anything wrong about this thing. He quickly walked under the iron pot and threw the duck in his hand into the stove. Water and fire are ruthless. The duck was touched by the fire, and instantly a red light appeared, trying to resist the burning of the flames. At the same time, Wang Gong also vaguely heard the woman's pleading in his ears. If it hadn't been for Su Tong's words just now, Wang Gong might have secretly put away the duck because of his curiosity and soft-heartedness. But at this moment, when he thought of his head tumbling in the iron pot, Wang Gong's eyelids twitched. Tiao silently turned on the blower on the side. As soon as the blower was turned on, the flames glowed blue, and the duck was instantly wiped out in the flames without even being able to hold on for a second. As soon as the duck was cooked, Su Tong, who was drinking soup, suddenly felt something special. I can't say anything specific, but I can feel that my soul has improved a bit, and I thought, sure enough, in addition to comforting the dead, killing such evil ghosts can also quickly improve the moral character of the paper maker. It's a pity that evil ghosts don't come across often. These two are purely a pair of resentful men and women. The woman died holding the man's head. The man hated her for tearing him into pieces, so they became entangled and became evil ghosts. This kind of fierce ghost will not be accepted by the city of Fuxi. When the ghost messenger sees it, he will be beaten to death with a stick. So Su Tong sat in the soup restaurant for another night and didn't see anyone else. At 2 o'clock in the night, a group of starving ghosts ran in. Su Tong gave them some money from the underworld as usual so that they could bribe the little ghosts to lead them to reincarnate in the underworld. Those who came after that would be normal people, drink the soup and leave. Su Tong didn't come here just to drink soup and gain experience. What was important was the information exchanged between himself and Gao Zhou on the drum tower. He took out a piece of paper. When he opened it, it showed the message Gao Zhou had recently left for him. After reading it carefully, he picked up the bowl and took a sip of the salty soup. It's a bit interesting. Gao Zhou left 4 messages. After Su Tong read them one by one, he looked relieved at first, then frowned, and finally smiled coldly and stopped reading. The first thing was that Gao Zhou followed the 2 eldest brothers to meet the so-called leader of the beggar clan. The relationship was not bad. From the leader of the beggar clan, he learned about the cause of death of the old storyteller Feng Lai upstairs. At that time, the old gentleman said that Gao Zhou was there when he was doing storytelling, so he was surprised by his death. After he returned, he met the leader of the beggar gang. When he mentioned this, the leader of the beggar gang laughed and said frankly that the old man deserved to die. It turns out that Feng Gleilu occasionally takes in some artists from the martial arts world, but the focus will be on the 4 directions of color, drama, photography, and criticism. It is said that if you become a resident artist, you will earn less than $50 a month. This salary is the only one in the world that a scorpion earns. Who wouldn't be tempted by such a high salary? But there's one thing, it's not easy to get money. Whatever you sing and say every day, there is a board with the content written on it before you go on stage, and you have to sing accordingly. The content is also very strange. Sometimes there is only one, but sometimes there are 2, 3, or even 4. You don't know which song is right to sing, but if you pick the wrong one, your life will be lost. According to the beggar leader, this is the trick of the boss of Feng Lelu. He wanted to know the secrets of heaven, but did not want to pay the price, so he came up with such a harmful trick and let the artists on the stage choose. No matter right or wrong, the cause and effect are all there. On these artists. The old storyteller obviously made a mistake and died on the spot. Although the beggar gang leader's explanation was not comprehensive, it could still explain why the old gentleman died on the spot after seeing the note. Su Tong nodded and continued to look down. The second piece of news was nothing more than Feng Lelu releasing the news, saying that he had an immortal treasure on his body and was seriously injured by Qian Shu, so that many people were now looking for him. The third message is about the fairy treasure, but the content is similar to what Qinju said, so it can be ignored. What really caught Su Tong's attention was the fourth piece of news. Because this news is about his master Shuigui. The beggar clan news network is not much worse than Feng Lailu, it is even worse. He accidentally heard the beggar leader talking about Shuigui during their meeting, saying that someone saw Shuigui in Hanzhong, and that he also killed 2 low-level masters in the street. It sounds like the leader of the beggar gang is having trouble dealing with Shuigui, and is planning to send someone to cause him some trouble. Gao Zhou doesn't know the specific reason. Hanzhong. He crumpled the note into a ball and held it in his hand, thinking about how long it would take to get from Hanzhong to City L. The distance was not short. Transportation in this era is not that convenient. Even if there are trains, they are far from being as convenient as connecting east, west, north, and south in reality. As for the trouble caused by the beggar clan to his master, he is not worried at all. To put it in real terms, my master is at the peak of his career at the moment, and he is just seeking death if he encounters a monster or a snake god. Jingle. At this time, the bell on the door beam suddenly rang. Wang Gong, who was lying on the table and still thinking about how Su Tong folded a little duck, suddenly trembled, and when he looked up, he saw a middle-aged man walking in. The man looked very generous, and he bowed his hand towards Wang Gong as soon as he entered the door, "Store, it's raining outside, can you come in and hide for a while?" Wang Gong first looked the man up and down, and when he saw that he really didn't look like a devil, he dared to nod. Then he didn't forget to ask if he wanted some soup. The man shook his head, "Just sit down for a while and get out of the rain." As the man spoke, he sat aside as silently as a statue. Su Tong and Wang Gong looked at each other. Wang Gong swallowed and remembered the rhetoric Su Tong taught him, and asked again, "Sir, are you passing by here, or do you miss your family?" Passing by refers to wandering spirits. As for missing family members, most of them are poor ghosts who have not had anyone to worship them for a long time. The man waved his hands when he heard this and said only 2 words, "Waiting for someone." Seeing this, Su Tong nodded, and Wang Gong stopped asking any more questions. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, the golden rooster croaked outside, and the man's figure disappeared without a trace. Su Tong stretched out and slapped on his face as usual. "I left the soup restaurant with a pot of hot soup to take away. But after what happened last night, Wang Gong begged Su Tong to come every night as much as possible." Su Tong didn't refuse this matter, because after the last street walk, he also found that the power of Beishinko was still not enough. There was such a place to gain experience, which was just right to help him practice. When he returned to the gate of Shangqing Palace, he saw that Fool was already standing at the door waiting for him, inviting Fool and Chang Miao to drink soup and have breakfast. As a result, Chang Miao lowered her head and refused to drink the soup. She ate the pork belly that she didn't have time to eat last night with sesame cakes. Belch. Killing a big elbow early in the morning was also the first time in Chang Miao's life. After eating and drinking, Chang Miao hurriedly left. Su Tong looked at the back of Chang Miao running out the door and couldn't help but feel weird. This guy was a bit abnormal today. In the past, when Chang Miao saw a fool, she wouldn't give him any good looks, but today she didn't even look at the fool, with a guilty look on her face, and she almost choked on her elbow. Didn't this make it clear that something was wrong? As a result, while he was thinking about it, he saw the fool walking out of the kitchen with a sad face, holding a blackened box in his hand. When he opened it, he saw that Taoist Zuzu was gone, leaving only a pinch of ashes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 218. As a result, while he was thinking about it, he saw the fool walking out of the kitchen with a sad face, holding a blackened box in his hand. When he opened it, he saw that Taoist Zuzu was gone, leaving only a pinch of ashes. The fool cried from morning till night that day, and Su Tong folded several little paper figures for him that he couldn't even coax. Waiting until night, I wanted to settle the score with this guy Chang Miao, but it turned out that this guy also knew that he was in trouble, so he didn't come back all night. Where is Chang Miao hiding? Not far away, there is a public toilet. There is a small room for storing sundries next to the toilet. The room is so small that a person cannot lie down straight. It was dark at night, and Chang Miao carefully opened a small box, which contained half of the burnt Taoist Zuzu, who was writing and drawing on a small piece of paper with a charcoal pen. Looking at the small pieces of paper piled up on the side, it is obvious that they are a day's hard work of Taoist Zuzu. Is this the only thing? It can also cultivate Taoism. Chang Miao took advantage of the weak light and squinted at the small words like flies on the top, muttering in her heart. It turned out that last night, when he got excited, he threw Taoist Pig and the box into the brazier, but Taoist Pig jumped out and half of his body was set on fire. Fortunately, Chang Miao reacted quickly and stepped on it. As a result, Taoist Zuzu was left with half of his body. Seeing that the thing could still move, Chang Miao began to study it curiously. Taoist Zuzu knew in his heart that this was to escape the clutches of a fool. The last chance, gesticulating without sparing any effort. He found charcoal and papyrus and said that it was his fate that led him to this situation. As long as Chang Miao saved him, he would pass on his lifelong secrets to Chang Miao. Chang Miao himself was also superstitious and felt that this was an opportunity given to him by Mr. Lao Jun, so he threw the straw paper into the iron box, put Taoist Zuzu into his arms, and began to talk at length all night long. Since Taoist Zuzu is dressed like a Taoist priest, he naturally knows some Taoist exercises. But how could Taoist Zuzu teach it to Chang Miao so easily, so he simply passed it on in a big way and directly passed on the fragments of the Tai's Hang Induction Sutra to Chang Miao. It is expected that a person like Chang Miao, who has no basic skills and does not even have basic qi nurturing skills, would practice such advanced Taoist skills. The results are completely predictable. It is just waiting for him to become obsessed, his soul will be scattered, and he will borrow the corpse to resurrect the soul. Seeing Chang Miao staring at the exercise scriptures he had written, Taoist Zuzu felt proud for a while. Thinking of the fool who tortured and teased me during this period, a burst of evil fire arose in my heart, and I thought, wait until I turn over, However, after reading the scriptures for a long time, Chang Miao suddenly stretched out his hand to cover the box again with Taoist Zuzu. He picked up the box and thought to himself, this thing says one thing after another. Let's just believe him for a while. But we need to hide him first. Where to hide him? Chang Miao thought about it in her mind, clapped her legs and walked out with the box in hand, climbed onto the dung cart nearby, and walked back after a while, and washed her hands carefully by the toilet sink, thinking that she was not afraid now. Stolen by thieves. Not to mention how Chang Miao studied Taoism, Su Tong spent these days besides coaxing fools and going to the beef offal soup restaurant to gain experience. There are no fierce ghosts, but sending ordinary ghosts to reincarnate can still accumulate some virtue. After a few days of brushing it up, I really feel like I need to improve my Beishinko. In addition to Wang Gong's regular diner, the store also had a special guest, the man who came in the early hours of that night. The man comes every night and sits in the shop waiting, neither drinking soup nor gossiping, just like a stone. Wang Gong felt terrible at first, but gradually he got used to it as time went by. Days passed day by day, and after waiting for a few days, Chang Miao came back with his head lowered. The fool just stood in the corner with red eyes and aggrievedness. Su Tong wanted to beat Chang Miao, but the fool stopped him. Chang Miao apologized profusely, and even bought a big bag of melon seeds for the fool, telling him that he could play here if he wanted to, and he wouldn't say anything as long as he played. The fool was also soft-hearted. He took the melon seeds and started laughing. Su Tong looked at Chang Miao's expression and vaguely realized that Chang Miao had not told the truth, but after thinking about it, he stopped pursuing the matter. After all, he was also living in Chang Miao's territory. However, after this incident, his view of the legend Chang Miao changed a bit. On the contrary, he was more optimistic about the fool, and simply let the fool live in the Shangqing Palace from now on, saving the fool from running back so late every day. Chang Miao was opposed to this matter in his heart, but who made him feel guilty, so he could only nod his head and agree. It is worth mentioning that during this period, more and more people were looking for Su Tong in the rivers and lakes. During this period, various strange cases suddenly increased, making Chen Jian and the others as tired as flies every day. Enough. Although Chen Jianren was straightforward, he kept his word and helped Su Tong investigate Feng Lelu's boss. But the strange thing was that no matter how Chen Jian checked, he couldn't find any information about the boss. This result was not unexpected. After hearing Gao Zhou's explanation of the murder in Feng Lelu, Su Tong planned to stay dormant for a while and wait until his master arrived before talking about anything else. After settling down the fool at night, Su Tong went to the beef offal soup restaurant again to gain experience. As a result, as soon as he entered the door, he saw an old acquaintance sitting there, it was none other than Chen Jian. Chen Jian was obviously waiting for him here. As soon as he saw Su Tong, Chen Jian stood up from his chair, hurriedly stepped forward and took Su Tong's arm and said, "Quickly tell me, where is that brat Zhao Jian? There's something we need his help with, it's urgent." Su Tong was stunned for a moment, and then he realized that Chen Jian, a reckless man, had never realized the fact that he was Zhao Jian from what happened last time. So he patted him on the shoulder and motioned Chen Jian to sit down first. "Zhao Jian has left a long time ago. He seems to have gone back to the province. After all, he has been fired and there is no need to stay here." Upon hearing this, Chen Jian's mouth twitched and he sat on the chair with a disappointed look on his face. Thinking about it, he was transferred from a public position. Now that he has lost his public position, he can naturally return to the province. Anyway, with his professional skills and family background, he can definitely find another more respectable job. Seeing Chen Jian's disappointed look, Su Tong waved his hand and motioned to Wang Gong to bring him 2 bowls of soup. "Eat first. If the sky falls, you always have to fill your stomach." After Su Tong finished speaking, he ignored Chen Jian and started eating while holding the bowl. Chen Jian saw that he was eating well and the broth was right in front of him. He couldn't hold back and started eating. For a moment, the soup restaurant was quiet, except for the sound of 2 men sipping soup. Only after the 2 of them finished eating did Su Tong ask Chen Jian what happened and if he could help. Chen Jian wiped his lips, thought for a moment and told Su Tong the matter. In fact, it is still the Buddha's head murder case. This case has been closed, but now a new scandal has arisen. The bodies of Song Baosheng, Guo Jinhua, Fu Yufan, and Zhang Yang have disappeared. The strangest thing is that the fully spliced Buddha statue that was taken into the evidence room has disappeared. That Buddha statue weighed at least 300 kilograms in total. It was impossible for ordinary people to carry it, let alone take it away. So it disappeared without anyone noticing? The Bureau characterized the matter as an internal thief. By coincidence, Chen Jian was seen wandering around in front of the evidence room. Just looking at Chen Jian's body, he can not only carry 300 kilograms, but also run without any problem. As for what he did to steal the Buddha statue, an idiot in the Bureau actually said that he coveted the beauty of the Buddha statue. Chen Jian exploded on the spot and punched the idiot with his fists. More than 10 people present could not stop him. As a result, the idiot was hospitalized and he was suspended. After Chen Jian explained everything clearly, Su Tong's smile was about to burst. Was he just greedy for beauty? This is simply a wild idea, and the person who came up with it is so creative. Wang Gong on the side couldn't help laughing when he heard it. No wonder Chen Jian, a reckless man, was blown away on the spot. However, this reckless man could actually think of looking for him, which was a rare moment for him to use his brain. Then, do you have any investigation direction? Seeing Chen Jian's expression getting worse and worse, Su Tong hurriedly asked while suppressing a smile. I didn't have much hope at all. After all, Chen Jian was a fool. It was no problem for him to fight, but he had no problem solving the case, haha. However, what surprised Su Tong was that Chen Jian, a fool, actually nodded vigorously, yes. As he spoke, Chen Jian narrowed his eyes and said as if reminiscing, a mother and son. Before the Buddha statue and the body were lost, I saw a mother and son wandering outside the station for a long time, especially the oily-haired and white-faced boy. He doesn't look like a good person at first glance. Mother and son. Su Tong was startled when he heard this, and suddenly thought of Sun Ding's mother and son, and thought to himself, could it be them? Just as I was thinking about it, I heard the reminder from the prop booklet. Side Mission 2, Follow up to the Buddha head murder case. Task tip, this case seems not to be over yet. There may be more important secrets in it. Digging out the secret may be the truth you want to know. Mission goal, solve the case. After hearing the prompt, Su Tong curled his lips. He was living a comfortable life, but why did a side mission pop up at this time? But then he thought, this matter really needs to be investigated. After all, the case was done by Qinju and the others, there is no doubt about this. But why did Qian Shao and the others create such a large circle just to kill Guo Jinhua, Song Baozheng and other gangsters and scumbags in the village? The answer is definitely not. Perhaps, as the prompt says, this case may contain the answer to why Qian Shao and the others called on the world's strange masters to gather in Bamang. Thinking of this, Su Tong thought for a while and patted the table. Let's go. After saying that, he stood up and walked out. When Chen Jian saw that Su Tong was leaving, he quickly stood up to follow him. When he reached the door, he put $2 on the table. No, 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 I'm treating you to this soup. Wang Gong hurriedly tried to push the money back, but Chen Jian's eyes widened and he was so frightened that Wang Gong took a step back. Only then did he see Chen Jian handing the money over and said, "Here, I'll take off these clothes." Even though they are wearing the same clothes, they are also people's policemen who do not care about the common people. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 219. Under the night, Su Tong and Chen Jian walk side by side. On the way, Chen Jian asked, "L City is so big, where can we find these two guys? Is it big?" Su Tong looked sideways at Chen Jian. Chen Jian was stunned for a moment and shook his head, "I don't know." Seeing Chen Jian's naive look, Su Tong didn't know why he thought of Li Bo, and he didn't know how the fat man was doing now. He would come and see him again if he had a chance. It was for fun. But even if it's not big, why are we getting more and more remote? Chen Jian noticed at this time that they were about to reach the planning area. There were a few old houses in front of them, and if they went further, they would leave the city and head towards Mengxiang. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look like you're dragging him to find someone. But Su Tong didn't explain, and just led him forward until he was about to go to Chaoyang town, when he suddenly stopped and took a sideways look, only to see a city god's temple next to the roadside appearing in front of him. This is it. After thinking for a moment to make sure he was looking in the right place, he pulled Chen Jian towards the temple. As soon as you enter the Chenghuang temple, you will see that it is even more dilapidated than the Shangqing Palace. The Shangqing Palace is still being renovated continuously. There are no broken bricks or tiles here. When you walk in, you can see a beggar lying on the ground. He is covered with a broken straw mat and his head is pillowed with a brick. He is sleeping incense. Looking at the way his mouth is almost flowing into a river, you don't know that he is in a dream. Dreamed about some delicious food. Why did you bring me here? Chen Jian became more and more confused, wondering why this guy looked as unreliable as Zhao Jian. We'll find out later. Su Tong grinned, rummaged through the props book, and finally found a ham sausage. There was nothing else. Most of my snacks were given to fools, except for some ham sausages, which fools didn't like to eat. But if a fool doesn't like it, it doesn't mean that others don't like it. After peeling off the skin, Su Tong squatted in front of the beggar and stuffed the ham sausage into the beggar's mouth. The beggar subconsciously opened his mouth and took a bite. The more he gnawed, the more delicious it became. When he tried to take another bite, he missed the bite. Instead, he bit his own lip, which caused a big blood blister. The beggar suddenly woke up from the sudden stinging pain. When he opened his eyes, he saw Chen Jian's terrifying face, which almost scared him out of his wits. Just when he was about to scream, Su Tong stuffed the ham sausage directly into the beggar's mouth. "Don't shout, we are the police and we want to find out more about the situation from you." The beggar squeaked, swallowed the ham sausage in his mouth, and then said with a suspicious face, "Are you the police? Hey, if you think we don't look like us, we don't have to be police." In the dark night, Su Tong narrowed his eyelids and his voice became cold and sinister. No, no, no. Police, police are good, police are reasonable. The beggar trembled in fright and nodded quickly. I want to ask you something. Have you seen a mother and son recently? Both of them are very well dressed, especially the woman with her hair tied up. She looks like she is in her 40s. She speaks very softly. She doesn't look like a local people. The beggar immediately became energetic after hearing this. If you ask him something else, he may have to think about it, but if you ask him about women, he will have a lot to say. I've seen her before. That woman is very beautiful. She has big breasts, a big butt, and wears black socks on her legs. Su Tong raised his head and glanced at Chen Jian, meaning, you see, there are skills in asking questions. He looked back at the beggar and nodded, yes, yes, but those are not black socks, they are silk stockings. Who cares about the socks? Hey, there's a scent on her body. I've never seen such an energetic girl in my life. The beggar couldn't help but gulp as he thought about the woman's appearance. Don't say it's useless, where are they? Chen Jian couldn't stand the beggar's wretched look and scolded him sternly. The beggar immediately softened when he was stared at by Chen Jian's copper bell-sized eyes. I don't know. I saw them come in and walk around in a circle. They muttered something that I couldn't understand or remember. Then they left in a car. Chen Jian was immediately disappointed when he heard this. When he was about to take Su Tong away, he saw Su Tong grabbing him. Don't leave in a hurry, we haven't done anything yet. Business. Chen Jian tilted his head and looked at him, not knowing what the so-called business was. Su Tong pulled him to the statue of the city god, put his hands together and bowed respectfully to the city god in front of him 3 times. After all, he was the fool's immediate boss, so he still had to have this respect. Then he pointed his hand at Chen Jian and said, push it away. Chen Jian frowned, but Su Tong said calmly, push it, there is a treasure underneath. When he heard that there was a treasure, the beggars behind him couldn't help but come up and look at it, wanting to see what other treasures there were down there. Chen Jian wanted to refuse, but he couldn't resist Su Tong's anger. If you can't push it, forget it. After all, it's too hard for you to push such a big stone statue by yourself. Other cases will tire you out before they are investigated. Chen Jianming knew that this guy was irritating him, but he was still very dissatisfied and curled his lips. That's it? As he spoke, Chen Jian stepped forward, moved his arms a few times, and looked at Su Tong sideways. I want you to open your eyes today. After Chen Jian finished speaking, he took a deep breath and suddenly pushed his shoulder up. Boom! Immediately dust fell from the beams, and the crumbling temple felt like it was about to collapse. But Chen Jian pressed closer to him, twisted his toes, and shouted loudly. Suddenly, a surge of strength came out, hard. Sheng Sheng pushed the city god statue back half a meter. Su Tong stood behind and watched, with a flash of light in his eyes when he saw this, Beiji collapse. He has seen Beiji bend more than once. In the second script, the boxing method used by Captain Wang is Beiji Quan. Comparing Chen Jian's Beiji Quan, I feel that Chen Jian's Beiji Quan is very similar to Captain Wang's Beiji Quan. Almost the same way. It's just that Chen Jian's Beiji Quan is obviously far inferior to Captain Wang. Hey! You recognized it? Chen Jian's face was full of pride. He didn't expect that this guy would recognize his boxing skills as soon as he made a move, and he couldn't help but praise him. Su Tong scratched his head and asked curiously, are you also from the army? Well, after I retired, I was assigned to be a police officer here. Chen Jian nodded without hiding it at all. Su Tong heard this and continued to ask, does everyone in the army learn this now? Not everyone learns it. I first learned the grappling boxing, but then I felt that the lethality was too low, so I hired a master from Menkan to teach him. Later it became popular. This kind of thing is not a secret, so Chen Jian naturally has nothing to hide. What he said satisfied Su Tong's curiosity. While the two were talking, a beggar on the side came up to take a closer look, but he didn't see any treasure. He couldn't help but ask, "Where is the treasure you mentioned?" Su Tong walked to the location of the statue of the city god just now. After stepping on the stone bricks on the ground with his toes a few times, he suddenly frowned and stamped his feet hard, and a hole was immediately created in the ground. When he lowered his head and saw that there was a big wooden box underneath, the beggar's eyes bulged out. He had lived here for almost 3 years, but he didn't expect that there was still a treasure hidden here. When I opened the box and took a look, I saw various bottles and jars of jade with calligraphy and painting neatly placed inside. How did Su Tong know there was a treasure here? It was really not his fault. When he first went to the soup house, the poor man named Lu Qiudong told him the location of the treasure hidden in their house to express his gratitude. At that time, he didn't pay much attention to this matter. Today, when Chen Jian mentioned the mother and son, Su Tong remembered this matter. The reason why he came in to ask about the beggar mother and son was just a casual question. He didn't expect that the pair of land shovelers were still there. Really been here. They probably wanted to see if there were any treasures here so they could pick up leaks or something like that, but they were afraid that they would never expect that the biggest leak was right under their feet. Su Tong casually picked up a white bowl. The white bowl had a big mouth and a flat belly. There were no patterns or carvings on it. There were only some patterns inside the bowl, which you couldn't see unless you looked carefully. However, with a quick touch, you can tell that this thing is not an ordinary object, otherwise Lu Qiudong would not have carefully stored it in this place. They didn't recognize the porcelain, but they had to recognize the shiny gold and silver items inside. The beggar's eyes widened as he looked at it. He has lived here for so long, without enough food and clothing every day. He didn't expect that there is such a big box of treasures hidden here. I'm afraid it will be enough for him to eat and drink for the rest of his life. When he thought that these treasures were about to leave him, the beggar naturally had mixed feelings in his heart. It's a pity that he didn't dare to grab it, not to mention that the two people in front of him looked like they were not ordinary people at first glance. The angry-eyed King Kong next to him had the strength to push open the statue of the city god in one go. He would probably be able to knock out the Gaul if he hit him. Just when the beggar felt uncomfortable, Su Tong suddenly glanced at the beggar. "Do you want it?" The beggar nodded wildly. Su Tong curled his lips and closed the box hard. "I won't give it to you." The beggar was stunned, and then saw Su Tong throwing a $5 bill to the beggar. "Tomorrow morning I will let the people in the old city antique market know about this, and tell them that I am short of money recently, and I will buy whatever I want in the evening. See you at the beef offal soup house behind Dashakiao outside the city. I'll wait there every night until it's over." The beggar originally complained that Su Tong was teasing him, but he unexpectedly gave him a 5 yuan bill. He was so happy that Su Tong added, "After the incident is completed, you can come to the soup restaurant to find me, and I will give it to you one piece, if you dare to be lazy." When he said this, he winked at Chen Jian, indicating that you, the tool man, should start working. Chen Jian glared at the beggar, raised his hand and punched the old brick beside him. Snapped. The big green brick 3 fingers thick was immediately smashed into pieces by a punch. The beggar was so frightened that he nodded repeatedly and swore that he would deliver the message at dawn. Su Tong nodded with satisfaction and asked Chen Jian to pick up the box and walk out. After the two people left, the beggar sat down on the ground and looked at the $5 in his hand happily. But when he looked at the hole in the ground and thought of the treasures in the box just now, the $5 in his hand suddenly disappeared. Fragrant. Sitting on the ground and thinking about it, the beggar suddenly remembered that the leader of the gang happened to be in L City recently. His eyes showed a cruel look for a moment. "I can't get it, and you can't get it either with that," he hurriedly got up from the ground. Get up and walk outside. Wait a moment, the next update will be coming soon.